Welcome everybody. So today I want to show you how to make a bowl using sprigs. So we're going to have just a regular piece of clay at the bottom, but then we're going to use sprigs that we've created to create the main bowl shape. So first off, you need to make a bazillion sprigs. So I created a damp box with this old pencil box, and I added a layer of plaster into the very bottom of it. And as long as the plaster feels moist, you can add a little bit more water to it if you need to. But as long as you keep it closed and you keep the plaster moist and then seal it every time you are not using it actively, it will keep your sprigs moist or whatever else you put in it for a really long time. So what I like to start with is having a bunch of sprigs kind of already ready to go and my plaster mold. And then I'm gonna make the little base piece. Now you could roll out a slab and cut out, a shape. You could try to make the entire bottom a sprig, but for me, I kind of like having the foot of it have sprigs on it so you don't see this piece, but the inside's going to be smooth anyway, and I find it easier to write my name onto something like this. Okay, so once I have that, I'm going to go ahead and start adding my sprigs. Now, depending on what look you're going for, you could start at the base and start adding them on here, but I prefer adding them on the bottom edge and then working my way backwards. I just like the way that it looks better. Now, for this first row, the only part of the sprig that's going to need to get scored at all is these little areas right here. So I'm gonna prep for success and just kind of like pre-score, and I'm just gonna do a little bit of scoring, okay? When you're choosing your sprigs for this, like pick the ones, if you've got a funky edge on one of them, put the funky edge where you're gonna end up actually, scoring, because why not? Okay, so once you think you have enough sprigs to go all the way around, I'm just gonna start by setting them up against the plaster. So I just wanna make it match, and I wanna leave a little gap at the edge here, especially if I have any chips or anything in the edge. So I'm just gonna push this on here and make it go all the way around. Now, sometimes they'll just stay the whole time, and sometimes they'll want to fall off. Depending on how wet or dry your clay is, they might want to shift. Now, I scored right here on these ones, and I already prepped these ones. If I want to add on my next layer on the opposite side of where I scored here, so like up here, that's where I'm going to score on the back of these ones. So I'm gonna score and add a little bit of the magic water, and then I'll tip this up so you can see what I'm doing. But I'm gonna layer this. I'm gonna curve in any scoring marks, and I'm gonna layer this so it touches where I had those scoring marks, but also fills in that gap, okay? So I really like to kind of just like smooth the edge right here before I add it on. So that way I have less cleanup later, okay? So again, here I'm overlapping it. I wanna clean up as much as I can as we go. And I'm just pushing it in there. So I'm creating like the fish scale pattern. So this side is gonna be here, and then halfway in between is gonna be my next row. So if yours are kind of wanting to fall off a little bit, I would go in little groups. So now I'm gonna add the next one and then this one, and I'm gonna keep going like that. So this is why you want to have like a billion sprigs already prepared, because if you are trying to make sprigs as you go, these sprigs that I've already added are going to dry out before I have a chance to finish my bowl. So you really want to make sure that you are adding the sprigs on as you go and have lots of sprigs ready to go. But moisture management is huge with this project. Make sure you check as you go that things are working out the way that you want them to. Because if you lift this up and you see that you're not, if you take a look and you've got like a gap right here, then you wanna find that out before you get all the way to the end, right? Because if you do have a gap, then you wanna peel it off and just add a new fresh sprig on there. So make sure that you're kind of checking and verifying as you go. If you lean this too far as you're doing this, like if you're adding the sprigs on, if you're scoring them on here, that's fine. But just be careful that you're not ruining your sprigs on that side when you do that. When you do get to the last sprig, or as you get closer, if you notice that like you're gonna have like, you know, not quite enough for a full sprig, kind of adjust. If you need to like overlap the last couple just a little bit to make sure that the spacing is correct, do that. But figure that out before you get to the very last one so you don't have a real funky spot. Okay, so at this point, I would go around and check and make sure that you've got all the stuff. Now, if there's clearly some areas that need a little bit of cleanup, I would go ahead and do some of that now, just while it's still slightly moist from the slipping part. But if you can avoid cleanup just from how you're slipping and scoring, that's usually the best. But you can see I'm starting my pattern. So now I'm going to do exactly the same thing again, but I'm going to go ahead and like just rotate it all the way around, and I'm going to pre-score this whole edge right here, just so it'll go a little faster while I'm doing the sprigs. So these sprigs are on this level because we're getting smaller and smaller. It is going to start to overlap a little bit more than we did on the previous layer. So there's probably going to be a little more overlapping right there. If you don't like that, you could alter how you're doing it. So you could do like every other one and then a third one if you want it to have a slightly different look. Me personally, I kind of like the way it looks overlapped like that, so it doesn't bother me. One thing, sometimes my fingers get really wet when I'm doing this, and I do like to keep a paper towel next to me so I can just wipe my fingers off, just so I don't get everything extra goopy. Now, this is my last one, and I've been overlapping at an angle. When you get to this one, if you want to continue that pattern, just lift this last one up just a little bit so you can slide your last piece underneath it before you squish it down all the way. And then, like I said before, make sure you go around and check for any funky bits, clean up anything that you can right now. Oh, because see, like I didn't push that one in far enough, so I have a gap right there. So in a minute, I'm going to take that out and replace it so it looks like the rest of them. If you don't quite get everything clean, we can do some more we will do some more cleanup at the end. Okay, so it looks like this one's probably, oh, it's not quite gonna be my last row. I'm gonna add one more row right here, but I'm gonna go ahead and score this little base that I made anyway, just so if I do end up touching that on this row, it's already scored and ready to go. Since I know this one over here is going to be my last one, while it's still kind of easy to move it, I'm going to pop it up just a little bit so it'll be easier for me to put the last piece under it when I come around. So I'm finding on this last one Every like third one for me is gonna end up being not quite in line because like since I'm getting smaller and smaller, I don't need as many pieces on each row, or at least they wouldn't look as even. So like this one right here isn't gonna be directly in between. It'll be a little bit off to the side, but as long as I keep it consistent, it'll be fine. Okay, so I added on my last foot. I made sure that I overlapped. I wanted to make sure that this bottom is flat, so I used the weight of the mold to push down onto the table, and that made this area kind of flat. I can smooth in here, add my name, and now I need to take this off the mold, because if I leave this on the mold overnight, it's just gonna crack off. Sometimes like as you're doing this, like you want to be careful not to pull away from the mold. You're trying to pull up and in. And sometimes that takes a little bit of doing, right? Especially if you've been using the magic water, like if it's still slightly sticky from the magic water, that can make it a little bit harder to get off the mold. But it is really important that we get it off the mold today. Now, if you pop a section, just rescore and stick it back down, like, because you don't want to pop a section apart. But you know it's starting to get a little bit looser now. And you just got to be real gentle until you can pull it all the way off. Oh, I saw it. I saw it start to go. Okay. See how it's starting to be able to come off? Okay. So once you've got all your bits free, then you can pull it off the mold and flip it over. So right now you can see the scale pattern on the inside, and this is super fragile, okay? So like you really, for this next step, you really have to support really good, okay? Now, if you can still see all the scoring, great. If you can't see scoring, you wanna make sure you do some more scoring, okay? We're not gonna add any magic water on the inside because we're just gonna be blending super, super crazy. But you have to do this while it's still moist enough to do so. So like these small ones, I can do in one sitting. So I've been filming this whole thing and I'm at 22 minutes, right? Now, if I try to push against this clay real hard, and I didn't have my hands supporting on the outside, these would just fall apart, right? Because you can see how much flexibility is still in this. But I'm just pushing some damp clay into those areas to help strengthen it. I'm not trying to add a bunch of thickness. I'm just trying to add some stability and strength. And as long as I'm keeping my hand supporting, then I can push pretty hard to blend this in really good, which is why I don't have to add the magic water. Oh, and if you do get, like I said, this is the spot that popped off a little bit earlier, just stick it back together and then make sure that you're supporting really good when you go to add the layer on the inside. But that's part of why we're adding this clay on the inside to help us strengthen this area so it doesn't do that. Okay, so once you get all the way around, make sure you go from multiple directions and catch any little funky bits, right? So make it nice and smooth. Go from multiple directions, making sure you're always supporting where you're smoothing. Now, at this point, if I'm making a bowl, once I'm done smoothing this, I'm done. I just have to look around the outside for any funky bits, right? And if I've got funky bits, like if I've got little hangy bits or anything around the outside design, I can just take a dry paintbrush and kind of blend it with the dry paintbrush. I wouldn't add a bunch of water to this unless you're adding more sprigs onto it, just because you don't want to weaken the clay and give it, you know, make it want to fall apart. But you can see I can make it real smooth on the inside if I go multiple directions. Also, if you're not making a ball, if you're trying to make a vase, so usually I start with a bowl first like this, because like if I wanted to start coming in to make more of a vase shape, I would still start on a mold with a bowl, but then I could start adding more pieces. And by the direction that I'm holding my hand as I'm smoothing, I can kind of direct the clay either in or out. And also it depends too on how many pieces I add on to the next level. So like if I wanted to make this, once I have this smooth, if I wanted to make this a vase, I would do the same thing, but instead of adding it on the outside, I would add the next layer on the inside and see how that starts to curve in, and I could continue with whatever shape I wanted. All right, so now is the time, go around, fix any little funky bits, and you can wipe it with a damp or a dry paintbrush, or you can pick out if there's any like clay boogies that are just boogies. You can use a needle tool to kind of clean it out. But just spend a little bit of time, make it really nice, make your shape real good. Make sure your name still shows, and just make sure if you do any blending that you're supporting on the opposite side so it doesn't fall apart. Thanks, everybody.